Bay City's morning heat pressed through the tall windows of Bayview University's business lecture hall, even with the ceiling fans struggling overhead. Emma Hayes sat in the very last row, back straight but head bowed over her battered notebook. Her pen scratched across the page, writing notes she wasn't processing. She had been up all night, playing piano at the Harbor Lounge, then rushing to check on her brother David at Bay City General Hospital. Soy milk and a stale bread roll had been breakfast and dinner. Her stomach growled softly, but she ignored it. Around her, other students typed on sleek laptops, their designer bags neatly tucked beneath their seats. A few whispered, their laughter low and smooth. Emma kept her gaze on her notes, used to the way they sometimes looked at her, curious, pitying, dismissive. Then the double doors opened, and the room shifted. Daniel King walked in, CEO of King Group, Billioniare, and Bay City's most elusive power player. He carried himself with quiet authority. Conversations stilled instantly. Some students straightened. Others whispered his name like a secret. He took his place at the podium. Economics, he began, his deep voice steady, isn't just numbers. It's people, choices, pressure, and the prices we pay. Emma tried to focus, but her vision blurred. The lines on the page tilted, her pen slipped, and before she could steady herself, the world went black. She came to with Daniel kneeling beside her, one hand steady on her shoulder. "Water," he ordered a nearby student, his voice firm but calm. Emma blinked at him, disoriented. "You fainted," he said softly. "When was the last time you ate?" "I'm fine," she managed, embarrassed. But Daniel's gaze lingered, taking in her pale cheeks, trembling hands, and faded dress. He said nothing more, just helped her sit upright before returning to the front of the hall. That night at the Harbor Lounge, Emma sat at the piano, fingers gliding over the keys. The dim, amber lights wrapped the room in warmth, soft melodies weaving through clinking glasses and quiet conversations. Halfway through her second set, someone ordered sparkling water at the bar. She glanced up and froze. Daniel King. He caught her eye, recognition flashing briefly, then walked toward her during the break. "You came back," he said quietly. "I work here most nights," Emma replied, aligning sheet music to hide her nervous hands. "You fainted this morning," he said, studying her closely. "And you're here again tonight?" Emma shrugged lightly. "Bills don't wait." His gaze flicked toward the tip jar, nearly empty, then back to her. "How far behind are you?" She hesitated, then sighed. 20,000. They'll lock my student portal next week. And David's hospital deposit is overdue. For a moment he said nothing. Then, slowly, "I can solve your problem tonight." Emma frowned. "How?" Daniel held her gaze. "One night with me. I'll transfer 500,000 immediately." The words hung between them like glass. Emma stared at him, breath catching, shame and anger flaring before dissolving into the cold weight of reality. David, the hospital bills, eviction notices, overdue tuition. "You were my lecturer today," she whispered. "I'm not faculty," he said simply. "Today was my last session. After tonight, I won't hold any authority over you." Emma stared at her trembling hands. "Do you do this often?" "No," he replied without hesitation. "This isn't routine. It's a choice. You can say no and walk away, and I won't follow you. But if you say yes, your tuition's paid tonight. David's deposit by morning." Her throat tightened. "And if I say yes? Then you survive," Daniel said softly. "And I live with my choice, just like you'll live with yours." Silence stretched between them, heavy and fragile. Emma closed her eyes, hearing her mother's old lullaby in her head. The 4 notes she used to hum when life felt too sharp to hold. Fold. Rest. When she opened her eyes, she whispered, "One night." Daniel nodded once, his expression unreadable. "My car's outside." That night changed everything. The next morning, Bayview University buzzed with whispers. She fainted in class, and now she's riding in King's car? Tuition paid overnight? Please. Sugar baby. It's obvious. Emma kept her head down, ignoring the cutting remarks as she walked through the courtyard. Her phone vibrated. 500,000 Nigerian naira received. She stared at the screen until the numbers blurred. Inside the lecture hall, Lily Morgan, one of the glossy, flawless types, smirked as Emma Saturday, "Guess you're special now," she said loudly enough for the room to hear. "Don't get too comfortable. Men like Daniel King get bored fast." Emma gripped her pen tighter, refusing to respond. Then the doors opened. Daniel King entered, his charcoal gray suit immaculate. Students straightened instinctively, the air shifting around him. Emma froze. He wasn't supposed to be here. Their deal had been clean. Over. But Daniel didn't look at her. Instead, he delivered another guest lecture, his voice steady. "Economics," he said, "is about choices. Every choice comes with a price." Emma's pulse quickened at the weight in his words. After the lecture, she tried to slip out, but his voice followed her. "Emma." She stopped. "Why did you block my calls?" "Because I don't need you," she whispered. "That night was a mistake." His expression was unreadable. "So you regret it?" "I don't regret surviving," Emma said firmly. "But don't confuse one desperate night with anything else." He studied her for a moment, then stepped aside. "Go." She went, heart pounding, certain she had just shut a door that wouldn't open again. That night at the Harbor Lounge, Emma played her sets as usual. Halfway through, 3 men walked in, their presence wrong for the polished room. The tallest slammed his palm against the piano lid. "You, stand up." The manager hurried over, hands raised. "Gentlemen, please." "She owes," the man barked, pointing at Emma. "She took money that isn't hers. Mark doesn't like being played." Emma froze. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie," another hissed. "Return what you stole, or you won't see tomorrow." Before she could reply, a calm voice cut across the room. "Let her go." 2 men stepped from the shadows, Daniel's security detail. Suits sharp, movements precise. "If you value your freedom," one of them said evenly, "walk away. Now." The 3 intruders hesitated, then cursed and retreated, shoving through the exit. The room exhaled. "Come with us," the bodyguard told Emma softly. She hesitated. "I have another set." "Not tonight," he said firmly. Minutes later, she slid into the back seat of a black sedan. The door opened on the other side. Daniel stepped in, his expression calm but his jaw tight. "You're safe now," he said. Emma turned to him, her voice sharp. "Because you had me followed?" "Because I knew someone would come for you," Daniel corrected. "Mark wants to hurt me. You're the easiest way." Her chest tightened. "Then you see why I can't stay in your life. Your world is dangerous." Daniel's gaze locked on hers. "And you see why I won't let you disappear. Not when danger has already chosen you." Days later, Emma left her tutoring shift and walked toward the bus stop. A black van rolled up quietly beside her. A cloth, a bitter smell, darkness. When she woke, her wrists were bound, and 6 other women huddled together in a dim, windowless room. A woman whispered, trembling, "They're taking us to an auction. If you're not sold, you're killed." Emma's blood ran cold. Who's behind this?" The woman hesitated. "Mark." The door slammed open. Men dragged them out into a larger room where masked figures sat watching. A man at the podium smiled darkly. "Beautiful, young, fresh," he announced. "We start at 1 million. Emma's stomach clenched. Panic clawed at her throat. 2 million. 2.5. 3. Then a voice cut through the chaos. Calm. Powerful. Familiar. 10. The room went silent. The masked bidders turned. Daniel King stood at the back, flanked by his security. "Sold," the auctioneer announced shakily. Minutes later, Emma stumbled into Daniel's waiting car, shaking violently. He caught her shoulders, steadying her. "You're safe now," he whispered. "I would have paid more." Tears stung her eyes. Why would you risk so much for me?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "Because this was never about money. The car rolled to a stop outside Bay City General Hospital. Daniel didn't follow Emma inside. He stayed by the curb, watching her disappear into the sliding doors, as if steadiness alone could keep the world from breaking again. Inside, the ward smelled like antiseptic and beginnings. David Hayes lay quiet, monitors translating hope into soft beeps. Emma pulled a chair close, took his hand, and spoke about ordinary things. The broken campus printer, the jacaranda that refused to stop shedding purple, the manager at the Harbor Lounge who always said smile and mean it. When she stepped back outside, Daniel was still there. "You can't keep doing this alone," he said, voice even. "I've been doing it alone," she replied, not unkindly. "That's how we got here." He studied her a beat. "Let me put security where you already are, outside the hospital, outside the lounge." Quietly. "Not at school," she said. "Not near David. Those are my lines." "Done," he said without pretending to negotiate. She should have felt grateful. Instead, something inside her bristled at the ease with which he drew lines around danger, as if the world would obey him out of habit. Later that week, dizziness sent her to a clinic downstairs from the ward. The doctor's verdict was gentle and without ornament. Malnutrition, dehydration, stress. 3 proper meals a day, he said. Sleep, or your body will take rest from you by force. Daniel didn't say "I told you so." He sent groceries to her building with no note and arranged the tab at a small diner around the corner. Emma marched to the counter to cancel it. The owner shook his head. "It's already paid. If you want to repay, eat." She ate. At Bayview University, the whispers thickened. A girl with impeccable hair said "sponsor" like it was a perfume note. Emma learned to look through people as if they were glass. That didn't stop the cut. Mark's shadow lengthened. A message shoved under her apartment door, "Return what isn't yours." A silence that rang when she picked up her phone at night and found no missed calls, because she'd blocked the one number that might have helped. She played the old lullaby at the lounge more often, for notes that climbed and folded, because it steadied her hands when nothing else did. Daniel watched from a distance most nights. Not in the room, but in the precautions that made the room safer. A quiet camera repaired, a bouncer whose eyes had learned new math, a service door that now actually locked. He kept his distance because she asked. He kept her in orbit because she was already there. The King Group archive room was quiet metal and older paper. Daniel stood over a gray cabinet labeled Foundation, Legacy, and pulled a ribbon file stamped with his father's precise hand. Inside, ledgers of small grants, clinic receipts, a black and white photo of a modest repair shop sign, Hayes Repairs, and a neat note in fountain pen ink. "Mr. Hayes, reliable, diligent. If his family ever needs help beyond this, extend it. Honor should survive the market. Richard King." A second slip recorded a hospital payment for Elaine Hayes. A final margin note, follow-up denied. Return in person. Stopped mid-stroke. The year his father's illness began. Linda, his chief of staff, found him there and said nothing for a long moment. "She's not a coincidence," she said softly. That afternoon, Daniel drove to Bayview Estate. Helen King met him in the sunroom, posture impeccable, eyes too keen to be fooled. He placed the file on the low table and said, "Mother." She read her husband's note once, then again slower. The photograph trembled slightly in her fingers. "I remember the man," she murmured. "Your father said he would revisit. Then chaos arrived, and I mistook urgency for importance." Her gaze lifted. "This girl, Emma Hayes, is from that family." Daniel nodded. "She's the one holding them together." Helen closed the folder, drew a breath that seemed to reorder the past. "Invite her here, if she will come." Emma almost didn't. A driver at her door with a card was usually the start of a bad story. But the message was simple. If you will come. No command. Just a room held open. The Bayview Estate was a study in quiet money. White walls, art that didn't shout, a garden convinced of order. Helen stood in the doorway of a sunlit room, a person who had practiced being unmovable and lately learned to bend. "Emma," Helen said, using her name like a soft landing. Thank you for coming. Emma took the edge of the settee, hands laced tight. Your message said it was important. Helen placed the open file between them and turned the note so Emma could read it. Emma's breath hitched. Her fingertips hovered over the photo of the little shop, as if touching it might break something already cracked. My father, she whispered. That's our sign. Richard meant to do more, Helen said quietly. I failed to see through the promise when the world grew loud. Silence gathered. Not the cold kind, the kind that allows you to breathe. Emma stared at the neat handwriting until her eyes blurred. Without thinking, she hummed the old lullaby under her breath. Up, fold, rest, just to steady her hands. Helen went still. That song, Helen said almost to the air. Years ago at a school recital, a girl with a broken keyboard played that melody. I paid her exam fees and left a note with the bursar for the girl who plays courage. I forgot her name. I never forgot the tune. Emma looked up, stunned. That was me. For a heartbeat, two timelines stitched themselves together. A widow making a small kindness. A child learning to survive by turning fear into music. Helen reached for her hand with a softness that would have startled her board. I misjudged you, she said. Forgive me, and allow me to do what should have been done without an audience. Emma's eyes burned. I don't know what to do with any of this. Then don't decide today, Helen replied. Eat, sleep, visit your brother. Decide tomorrow. Daniel's phone rang in the doorway before Emma could answer. He answered, and the shift in his posture told them who it was. Bay City General, he said. We're on our way. The word awake does not arrive on a drum. It arrives as a nurse at the door saying, he opened his eyes. And a hallway that suddenly knows which direction to bend. David Hayes was propped on pillows, thin, blinking. A smile like a miracle that had taken its time. Hey, Izzy, he rasped, using a childhood nickname she hadn't allowed herself in years. Emma cried the way people cry when the bill collector finally forgets their address. Daniel stood at the foot of the bed, impossibly composed, eyes not. After, Emma sat with him in the corridor that smelled like disinfectant and second chances. Thank you, she said, and meant the words for more than the bill. This isn't charity, Daniel said. It's a promise coming due. Bay City did what cities do when presented with nuance. It flattened it into gossip. A blog ran photos of Daniel at a charity gala with a willowy socialite. The caption wrote a story that wasn't there. Power couple? King and heiress spark rumors. Emma saw it over someone's shoulder and felt the ground tilt for old reasons. Worlds she didn't fit, rooms that weren't built to include both her and mirrors. She avoided Daniel for 2 days she could not afford to lose. He texted twice from a private line and then stopped, because respecting boundaries was a lesson he had learned late and intended to keep. Mark sent a reminder instead. A photograph of Emma's building taken from across the street. Beneath it, you can't hide in his shadow forever. Daniel wanted to move her. Temporary apartment, controlled access, security on the floor. Emma said no. I won't vanish into solutions that aren't mine. Then let me put eyes where you already are, he said. Not at school. Not near David. Those lines stand, she said. He didn't argue. He deployed guards who knew how to be invisible and told them to remember they were guests. At the Harbor Lounge, the manager slid a brown envelope onto the piano. Half now, half after, he murmured. And Emma, smile more. It makes them tip. She did not. She did play the lullaby. Whispers turned to headlines when King Group sent out a press advisory. Daniel King to make personal statement, Harbor Convention Hall. The marble lobby filled with cameras, reporters, and people who described themselves as media. Backstage, Daniel adjusted his cuff and reviewed a few sentences he had written on the back of a meeting agenda. Linda tapped her tablet, reading the room before he stepped into it. They're primed for spectacle, she said. They'll get clarity, Daniel replied. He walked onto the stage. The room settled like a creature deciding whether to bite. There have been rumors, he began, voice a shade lower than usual, steady enough to carry without force, about alliances made for advantage. about marriages arranged to purchase influence. Let me be clear. Cameras leaned forward in unison. I will not marry for power. Status without love is nothing. There is one woman I choose. He let the quiet hold for a heartbeat. Her name is Emma Hayes. The room broke into an animal of noise. Questions, flashes, the metallic taste of public appetite. Daniel stepped back from the podium, ignored the shouted. Who is she? When's the wedding? He had said what needed saying. The rest could argue with itself. At Bay City General, Emma watched on a small screen above a vending machine. The world tilted again, but this time the floor did not vanish. A nurse clapped and said, "He's handsome, dear." Emma laughed through tears that surprised her. Helen watched from the estate, a hand at her throat. "Richard," she murmured, as if speaking to an absent judge. "Your son has your stubbornness when it counts. Cornered men make loud mistakes. Mark made 3. First, he sent a courier to Bayview University with fabricated invoices showing Emma had siphoned donations from a student fund. The head of department called her in, eyes wary. Daniel's legal team had already filed a statement by the time she sat down. The invoices were fakes. The courier was in custody. The printers where they'd been run had cameras. Second, he tried to bribe a nurse on David's floor to block access during rounds. The nurse wore a quiet mic and a body cam. The envelope appeared on video like a confession trying to be subtle. Third, he called from a burner phone and threatened the wrong man. One of Daniel's security leads who had spent a patient week coaxing a frightened driver into testifying about the auction. The call traced to a warehouse by the docks where walls kept better secrets than people did. Police sirens traded the night for morning. Mark ran exactly as far as the edge of his own arrogance and then tripped. In the raid's debris they found a ledger with bids and dates, a list of women tagged with numbers, and a small, stupid note. K, take the piano girl first. Daniel didn't attend the arrest. He sat in his office with the blinds open and called Emma. "It's done," he said. "He won't touch you again." "You can't promise the future," she replied. "I can promise to meet it at the door." David's recovery was not a miracle in a headline. It was a chart that listed small victories. It was soup Emma didn't burn and a home nurse who smiled like a person who had learned the names of all the machines and chose to use yours anyway. It was David sitting, then standing, then walking the length of the ward with a grin so wide it hurt everyone who saw it in the best way. Helen arrived one afternoon with a stack of home-cooked meals and a piano book. She placed them on a chair and said, "Your hands deserve rest between songs. To David and to Emma, your courage deserves a home." In the evenings, Emma played the upright piano Daniel had rescued from a storage room and placed in her small apartment without ceremony. He never stayed when she played. He stood in the doorway, listened, and left smelling slightly of the rain that Bay City used to cool itself. "Why do you always leave when I start?" she asked once. "Because some music isn't mine to interrupt," he said. The city tried to write them as scandal turned fairy tale. They refused both drafts. Emma kept tutoring sessions. Daniel still worked late and ate standing if he wasn't careful. They texted more. They argued sometimes about boundaries, about pride, about the right way to accept help and the wrong way to give it. It began to look like life. Blue Hour laid a soft skin over Blue Harbor Restaurant. The lagoon outside turned to dark metal, lights sprouting along the far shore. A small string quartet played a melody that sounded suspiciously like Emma's lullaby, slowed and widened into something a room could hold. Daniel stood and walked around the table. The room stilled itself in the polite way expensive rooms do when they smell a story. He knelt, not for spectacle, but because some vows require a lower center of gravity. "I fought rivals," he said, voice just for her and somehow for the room. "I faced my mother when she was wrong and she faced me when I was. We found your father in my father's handwriting. We found your childhood in my mother's memory. None of it matters without this. Emma Hayes, I choose you. Will you choose me?" Fear and hope collided in her chest and, for once, did not break anything. She smiled the kind of smile that comes after a long fight with weather and nodded, because the word yes sometimes deserves quiet more than volume. The wedding was not for the papers. A private garden at the lagoon's edge. Helen King in the front row, regal and somehow warmer for it. David in a navy suit that made him look like the boy in the old photograph who'd finally stepped out of it. A few friends. The sound of water going about its business. They did not promise fairy tales. They promised the ordinary heroism of every day. To fight headlines with truth, predators with law, loneliness with presence. Emma slipped the ring on and thought of her mother's hands showing her the 4 notes. Up, fold, rest, and realized the song had not been a lullaby after all. It had been an instruction. Later, in the quiet of their apartment where the city's noise learned to wait at the window, Emma sat at the piano. Daniel came to stand behind her, resting a hand lightly on her shoulder. "You know," he murmured, "you were never a ledger to balance." She looked up at him, eyes bright. "And you were never just a fix." Outside, Bay City moved on, loud, restless, unyielding. Inside, 2 people kept a promise tied years ago by a father's note, a mother's kindness, and a child's song. They had paid their prices. They had chosen again. Emma placed her fingers on the keys and played the 4 notes that had carried her across. The sound was small and enough.